Picture slaving away as a hardware engineer, living out your days with friends and family. But one day you pray for a more interesting life, only to have your wish granted as you're flung into a mysterious world filled with strange magic and dark entities. The anime opens with the power system in this world, where humans take potions to obtain one of 22 different power pathways and become Beyonders. Within each pathway are 9 stages of power called sequences, with 9 being the weakest and 1 being the closest to the level of a god. Following our MC, Klein Moretti, he awakens from what he believes to be a nightmare, but seeing a bloodied notebook and revolver in front of him, Klein begins to wonder where he is. As different memories from a different life flash through his mind, he suddenly senses a cold sensation brush by his shoulder, but when he turns to check, there is nothing there. Having been called Klein by the ghostly apparition, Klein checks his reflection, realizing that this isn't his body and that he has somehow transmigrated into a body with a bullet hole in his head. Elsewhere we follow 2 policemen stumble onto the corpses of Welch and Naya, people that graduated from the University of Koei, and from the state of the room, Dunsmith, the captain of the police, deduced that black divination had led them to take their own lives. Dunn wonders if a Beyonder was sacrificed to awaken an evil force. But having found a picture frame of Klein alongside Welch and Naya, Dunn begins to profile Klein. Apparently, Klein's parents are dead, and he lives with his sister within the Tianjin city of Awa County in the Lone Kingdom, north of the continent. With Klein being a fresh graduate of history, having studied ancient Fasak and Hermes, we follow Klein flicking through a notebook with records starting around May 29th, where Klein and his friends had apparently found an ancient notebook and begun deciphering it, with Dunn strangely able to deduce the discovered notebook to be from the 4th epoch, along with the writer of said notebook to be from the Antigonus family. We see Klein baffled by what he is reading. Words like the Black Emperor, the Tudor Kingdom, and Hornace Mountain Ranges stand out to Klein, but strangely an entry on the 27th of June is missing. Further in the notebook lies a bloodied hand along with a log that mentions the word Hermes along with a declaration that everyone will pass away, including Klein himself. Although freaked out, Klein suddenly hears a voice from the other room, quickly closing the notebook. Managing to cover up some blood stains, Melissa Moretti, Klein's younger sister and a Backlund University student, comes to check on Klein, having just woken up. As Melissa enters the room, Klein is seen concealing his revolver, secretly dropping it into one of his drawers. But when Melissa asks what Klein is hiding, he mentions that his stopwatch is broken. Annoyed, Melissa chooses to help Klein fix the stopwatch, but as she leaves, Klein confirms that the hole in his head is healing, wondering if the previous Klein's death was accidental or intentional. Klein says he can't retrieve all of the memories of his body, but he does know the ancient notebook has something to do with his transmigration, as he remembers his previous life quite clearly. Having lived a pretty modern life with family and friends, and his most recent memory was him wishing for better luck via a luck enhancement ritual, Klein is suddenly brought back to reality as Melissa hands him some bread, declaring that she needs to head to school, but remembers to remind Klein to purchase some bread, lamb, and peas. With Melissa promising to whip up something tasty for Klein tonight, she departs with a smile, but Klein fears he won't be home to greet Melissa. Suiting up and retrieving his revolver, Klein finds it weird that Melissa didn't hear the revolver go off if he took his own life. So as Klein heads to the bakery to pick up some fresh bread, he greets Mrs. Smyron. Smyron reassures Klein he'll get a job soon, but Klein suddenly detects a person spying on him, only to turn back to Smyron thanking her for the 8-pound bread. As Klein heads through Iron and Cross Street, Klein acknowledges that this world may be parallel to his old one, suddenly spotting some men playing the landlord game. Klein remembers that the landlord game was created 100 years ago in the Intis Emperor, where Rosel Gustav himself invented the game. Rosel had also invented tarot reading, created the steamship, and promoted the Spring Festival. But Klein suspects that such an innovative emperor like Rosel must have been a transmigrator as well. Having dropped a coin, Klein kneels down to pick it up, but seeing a shadow cast over him, Klein prepares to draw his revolver. Realizing it is only a clown handing out flyers, Klein calms down as the clown mentions how they'll be waiting for him at 7 tonight. But as Klein leaves the scene, he suddenly brushes past a strange man. Overwhelmed by the crowd around him, Klein sneaks into a hut to cool off, but is suddenly called to sit down by a fortune teller. Outside the hut, we see the man following him earlier approaching the hut, but a single glance from another man sends Jenkin away. With Klein more calm, he sits down to have his fortune read, managing to convince the lady to give a reading for free. The fortune teller asks what Klein wants to know, and without hesitating, Klein asks to know about his past, present, and future. As some tarot cards are shuffled, Klein is shown 3 cards to represent the answer to his questions, and with Klein asking to see his present first, Klein lays eyes on the Fool card. With an eerie silence filling the room, the duo suddenly notice a girl enter the hut, only to scold the fortune teller for impersonating her, as she is meant to be a beast tamer. At that moment, we see one of the strange men entering the hut as well. But luckily, Klein has already left the scene. At home, Klein creates 4 talismans representing the 4 corners of the luck enchantment ritual he believes brought him to this world. And as he stands in the center of the ritual, he begins to spin to acknowledge the celestial governing the ritual. Within a few seconds, a massive gust of wind sends the papers in his room flying, but Klein wonders why nothing is happening. Right on cue, his head begins to throb horrendously, suddenly collapsing as streaks of red paint his surrounding room. Crying out in pain, Klein is submerged in a mist-filled plain where various light orbs surround him, only for a red and blue orb to begin circling him. Elsewhere, we follow Audrey Hall call out to her mirror, all whilst in the middle of the ocean. Alger Wilson seems to be performing a similar ritual, both representing the red and blue orbs respectively, as they too are flung into the mist-filled world. Both Audrey and Alger ask to know why they're here, wondering if Klein is the one who summoned them to the divine world. In the blink of an eye, the mist-filled domain begins to transform into something more comprehensible, and with a wave of his hand, Klein realizes he can create and control the realm before them, suddenly erecting a table for the duo gathered. Alger speaks up, asking to know who Klein is, but Klein is conflicted as he utters that Zhoming Rue was his previous life's identity. Stealing his resolve, Klein takes a seat at the table, forcing both Audrey and Alger to join him. Klein introduces himself to be the Fool, deducing that Audrey will be easier to speak to than Alger, who seems on edge. But out of nowhere, Audrey cries that she always dreamt of becoming a Beyonder, asking Klein how she can become one. Klein realizes he doesn't know what Audrey is talking about, choosing to ask Alger to answer Audrey's question instead. Alger believes Audrey to be a lone noble. As for himself, Alger is from the faraway Sonia seas, curious as to how Klein brought them here. Alger utters that one must first join a church to become a Beyonder, but this is not something most people want, as Beyonders are tasked with fighting against dark forces. Audrey asks if there are other ways to become a Beyonder, something that rattles Alger as he admits he has 2 Sequence 9 potions, one called Sailor and the other the Audience. Klein has no idea what these potions are, interested to know if the Gray Fog and his transmigration are features of a Beyonder's skills. But suddenly Audrey declares she has made a pact with Alger, asking if Klein can stand witness to said pact. Alger admits he can sense great potential from Klein, offering to handle matters that Klein asks of them, something that prompts Klein to set up gatherings between the 3 of them every Monday at 3 p.m. in order to extract as much information from this world as he can. Suddenly, Klein begins to feel nauseous, along with hearing some knocking on his room. So before he departs, he assigns Audrey the codename Justice and Alger the codename of the Hangman. With Audrey fangirling over their new tarot card-themed club, Klein slowly begins to lose touch of his mist-filled world, ending the gathering as everyone is sent back to the real world. Answering the knocking, Klein hears that the police are at his doors, swiftly rushing to conceal his notebook and revolver only to peep out the keyhole. Greeting the policeman, Klein realizes Leonard Mitchell of Alwa County Police was the man stalking him earlier, but Leonard says he was simply protecting Klein. Klein is agitated, seeing, as Dunn is also here to perform a routine inspection, reporting to Klein that his friends had taken their own lives, and within a few seconds Leonard had managed to locate Klein's hidden notebook. Leonard smirks as he asks Klein to explain the logs in the notebook, and seeing as he has no way out, Klein collapses onto his bed, uttering that he can't remember anything. Dunn says there is evidence of Klein at Welsh's home, something that is news to Klein as well. But as Dunn takes out a smoking pipe, he takes a whiff from the pipe only to ask for the revolver Klein is hiding. As Klein points Leonard over to its hiding spot, Klein takes the chance to admit he had tried taking his life, but when he woke up, he was strangely alive. Dunn says he believes Klein, but Klein will still have to be interrogated by a psychic in hopes of Klein retrieving his memories. Leonard utters that Klein is quite lucky, as those who delve into such dark practices normally end up losing their lives. Escorted onto the streets, Klein fears his identity as a transmigrator will be uncovered. But out of nowhere, a petty thief turns the corner, having stolen some bread from a shopkeeper. Catching the attention of the policeman, Dunn helps capture the thief, but before the boy can return what he stole, he ends up causing a ruckus, buying time for Klein to flee the scene. Bumping into passersby and weaving through alleys, Klein manages to lose the police, but as he glances up into the sky, he spots some water being dumped onto him. Strangely, the water suddenly freezes in mid-air, something Klein recognizes to be some sort of time and space ability, freaking him out as a Beyonder is nearby. As the world around him begins to upheave and behave weirdly, Klein tries his best to flee, managing to squeeze past his obstacles and enter a carriage. Asking the driver to head to the port, Klein takes the chance to catch his breath, wondering if the situation has calmed down, but when Klein asks to be dropped off, he realizes that Dunn is the driver of the carriage. Suddenly waking up, Klein is confused at his surreal dream, but outside his door, Klein spots Dunn appear once more, making Klein wonder if Dunn can manipulate people's dreams. Before Klein can make a move, Dunn declares they're stronger during the night, prompting the space around Klein to morph once more as a strange lady appears behind Klein, asking him to remain calm as she sends Klein into a daze. Flung into a different realm, Klein notices his parents enshrouded by some gray fog, but before he can call out to them, the whispers of the strange lady alert Klein to stay focused. Klein realizes the lady probably can't see his parents due to the gray fog, but in that instance, the lady leaps onto Klein, demanding Klein explain where the ancient notebook is. Entranced, Klein says he has no clue, plus he has no idea what happened to Welsh and Naga. The lady asks what Klein was doing when his two friends were murdered, but with a single action, Klein shows he had taken his own life around the same time his friends did. Back in reality, Daily Simone says Klein is a tricky case as everything he says is true and he did shoot himself in the head but is alive somehow. Daly says Dunn should be careful with Klein, but seeing as the Antigonus notebook is still missing, Dunn says Klein is still in danger, asking if Klein wants to join them and become a Beyonder. The next day, we see Klein had been given a business card that instructs him to head to the Hound Pub and join the Nighthawks, an opportunity for Klein to learn more about this world. Upon entering the pub, Klein is thrown off seeing a crowd cheering as they watch a dog devour some rats. And to make things worse, a mini brawl starts up. With Klein clearly out of place, the bartender asks Klein to leave, but Klein mentions how he wants to hire some mercenaries. Annoyed, the bartender demands to know why Klein is here, but upon hearing that Dunn had asked him to come, the bartender guides Klein to a secret elevator. As the ride begins to move, it opens into a lavish-looking office deemed the Blackthorn Security Company headquarters, prompting Klein to greet the sleepy clerk, Roseanne Adelaide. When Klein introduces himself, Roseanne immediately shows Klein another secret passage, surprisingly watching as Leonard nonchalantly passes by. Descending a staircase, Roseanne mentions how they aren't so busy at the moment, passing by Royale Radine, someone Roseanne acknowledges is very pretty. Now moving through some corridors, our duo stop by Fry, who seems busy sketching up something. And as they make their way deeper along the passage, they walk by Kenley White, a member of the Nighthawks who joined 6 months ago. Stumbling onto a fork in their path, Roseanne instructs Klein to carry on alone, mentioning how the captain is waiting for Klein, plus Roseanne is quite scared of their captain. Following the lit path into a massive open room, Klein notices a towering pair of doors called the Chinese Gate in front of him. Off to the side, a smaller duty room opens to reveal Dunn, who greets Klein, Happy to see Klein has accepted his proposal. Given some papers to sign, Klein is assigned into the 7th unit of the police department, an alias for their organization, as they work under the Church of the Evernight Goddess. With a firm handshake welcoming Klein to the team, Dunn warns Klein that as a Nighthawk he may lose control, instructing Klein to pick up a candle and follow him. Entering into a candle-lit room, Dunn shows off the many souls that have been sacrificed to the Nighthawk, and the leading cause was them losing control. Dunn says the Fallen have carved a path for their predecessors, something Klein respects as he places his lit candle beside the others, only to be asked if he knows about the myth of creation. Klein recounts that the Creator made up all of existence, having created the sun and crimson moon using its eyes, leaving its body to make up the land and the stars. The Creator's hair turned into a phoenix, and its ears became demonic wolves. And interestingly enough, humans can make potions with mysticism ingredients to access power from the pathways. Klein recounts the Hanging Man, mentioning that the Church of Evernight Goddess has access to 4 different pathways, these being the complete sleepless pathway, the Corpse Collector, which is good for self-defense, the Mystery Prayer, and Seer, who dwells in mysticism, but suffers offensively. Dunn says he won't ask Klein to pick a certain pathway just yet, advising that Klein chat with Old Neil in the alchemy room to help with his decision. As Klein leaves Dunn's office, he reasons the Sleepless and Corpse Collector pathways are useless since he needs information on mysticism, and seeing as he can't decide between Mystery Prayer and Seer, Klein enters the alchemy room only to notice no one is present. Out of nowhere, a massive bang sends Old Neil flying into the room, and with Klein introducing himself, Old Neil asks Klein to help him tidy up some documents. As Klein sorts out some books, Old Neil is impressed to hear Klein studied ancient Fasek and Hermes during his history major in university, uttering that if Klein works hard, one day he can decipher the notebooks that went missing after Emperor Rosel's death. Klein is surprised Old Neil is in possession of 3 missing transcripts, revealing that there were strange symbols Rosel invented containing mysterious powers, and after 150 years of silence, Old Neil had managed to decipher some of the symbols. Showing his progress, Old Neil says the transcripts were a diary, but immediately Klein recognizes the symbols to be simplified Chinese. Reading over the transcript, Klein hears that Rosel Gustav thought of himself as the protagonist, recounting a time when he danced with Lady Florina, but Klein can't help but smile at Rosel's diary records. Suddenly, Klein notices Rosel's records mentioning how the potions and pathways aren't that important, and it's the user's ability to internalize the power that makes all the difference. To end the transcript, Rosel says he regrets his pathway as he should have chosen either the apprentice, the seer, or the marauder, throwing Klein off as he hears Rosel has made a grave mistake. Brought back to reality by Old Neil asks why Klein is daydreaming, but Klein apologizes, hiding the fact that he can read the transcript. With Old Neil asking if Klein has any idea what he'll be choosing as his pathway, Klein doesn't hesitate to trust Rosel's message, declaring that he'll choose the seer, something that intrigues Old Neil. Old Neil reminds Klein that he can't change his mind once he takes the potion, but Klein stands strong, making Old Neil smirk as he readies the potion. Fusing together some pure water, nightshade's extract, gold mint leaves, poison hemlock extract, dragon bloodgrass powder, and Lavo's squid crystallized blood, only to top it off with some stellar aqua crystals. With a mystical smoke cloud bursting from the potion, Old Neil presents Klein his potion, an item that makes Klein tense as he questions if it's edible. Seeing Klein hesitant, Old Neil tells Klein to relax, as his nerves will only disrupt the absorption process, and seeing as the solution to all his questions are in front of him, Klein gulps down the potion in one go. Immediately, the potion begins seeping into the very essence of Klein's being, causing Klein's heart to beat rapidly as he spots his vision acting strange. Old Neil says it's fine, asking Klein to focus and think of an object that exists to calm his mind. And when Klein thinks of Top Hat, he manages to calm down, only for Old Neil to ask Klein to think of an object that doesn't exist. Within a few seconds, the ground beneath Klein begins to rumble as a sudden burst of power causes the ceiling to rupture. horrifying old Neil as he instructs Klein to control his thoughts. In Klein's mind, he had pictured a missile, and as his imagination runs wild, Klein can't help but think of all the vehicles that exist in his previous world. Old Neil notices various potions in his laboratory suddenly spilling out, crying for Klein to control his powers, but Klein seems to have pictured a catastrophic explosion, barely able to quench his imagination as his eyes now seem to have been soaked in a dark hue. Immediately, Klein sees everything differently, a feature of the seer as he has spirit vision, where he has the ability to read people's auras and tell their health condition. Klein is sad to see old Neil's health isn't as good as he thought, suddenly flinching as he notices some eyes behind old Neil. Something old Neil utters is just some magic from a ritual he performed. Glancing around the room, Klein notices a figure evaporate, but old Neil asks that Klein not exhaust his spirituality with his spirit vision, revealing that when Leonard had first become a Beyonder, he tripped down some stairs after taking his potion. Old Neil shows off a tip to turn off the spirit vision, asking Klein to tap his forehead twice to deactivate his ability. Plus, Klein can use his spirituality on divination arts like the dowsing rod along with performing other rituals. Before Klein leaves, old Neil hands Klein his demon hunting gear along with some receipts, something old Neil says Dunn will reimburse him for. Reporting to Dunn, Klein is flattered hearing Dunn compliment his quick adaptation to his seer abilities, but Dunn warns Klein not to pry into things he doesn't understand as it may cost his life. With Klein heeding Dunn's warning, he hears he'll work as a clerk before he becomes an official member of the Nighthawks, and with a payment of £3 a week. Klein ecstatically accepts his £12 payment early, especially since his big brother Benson earns £5 to £6 a week. As a daily task, Klein is asked to purchase a cane and walk around Welch's home in hopes of him remembering anything about the missing notebook, but suddenly a carriage pulls up beside him only for Leonard to ask Klein to get in. As rain descends onto the town, we see Klein given an assignment and briefed on Elliot, the son of a tobacco merchant, Viceroy. Klein is surprised Beyonders take on kidnapping cases, but Leonard says Viceroy was their previous client as they had found Viceroy's lost cat in the past. Seeing as Klein's seer role is perfect for locating things, Leonard hands Klein some of Elliot's belongings, only for Klein to make use of his cane, using it as a dowsing rod as he activates his spirit vision. In the blink of an eye, the space around Klein becomes masked in different hues, and having filtered out all the unnecessary information, Klein manages to locate Elliot's position, asking the carriage driver to continue straight. Within a few minutes, Klein and his dowsing rod have led them to Forston Street, and upon heading into a nearby building and up some stairs, Klein points Leonard to a room where Elliot is being held captive. Klein declares that there are 2 kidnappers inside the room with Elliot, and seeing as it's Leonard's time to take over, he begins by dismantling the door standing in their way. Spotting the intruders, the kidnappers toss their table at Leonard, buying enough time to whip out a gun and fire a round at Leonard, but sadly it misses. As Leonard closes the distance, he manages to destroy the attacker's gun, only to pummel one of the men. As the other charges him, Leonard manages to parry and block each of the man's attacks with a single hand, noticing the man has bloodshot eyes, but regardless, Leonard sends the man flying as well. Having wrapped up things, Klein reassures Elliot that everything is fine now, but out of nowhere a faint feather descends onto the men's bodies, suddenly popping as the unconscious men begin to rise up. With Klein taking Elliot to safety, Leonard stays behind and watches as the men's bodies begin to morph and fuse into a demonic creature. Seeing the creature dive towards him, Leonard ducks and weaves, occasionally landing several monstrous blows that knock the creature back, and with the creature clearly too weak to fight back, Leonard puts it down with a single wave of his palm. Strangely, the remnants of the creature escapes from Leonard and slips by Klein, prompting Klein to raise his revolver in its direction, only to use his cane to help him locate the creature's presence. Out of nowhere, the creature appears from the walls beside Klein, and having been overrun with fear, Klein blindly takes aim and fires. Luckily, Klein's shot sends the creature flying into the skies to further escape. But Leonard has the situation under control, having dragged the creature into his crimson domain. slowly watching as the creature is bound and torn apart. Leonard reassures Klein that his abilities have put the creature to rest, but suddenly Klein begins to remember memories of Klein's body being in this building before, hiding such a revelation for now. With Elliot reuniting with his father, Leonard compliments Klein's shot, ordering Klein to stay away from the creature's corpse as it may contaminate him. Leonard wonders where the men got their potions from, annoyed seeing as they faced another uncontrollable Beyonder, pointing out how lucky Klein is to have run into one on his first mission. As Leonard celebrates a job well done with a high five, he manages to weird Klein out with some compliments. But as Klein leaves the scene, Leonard strangely hears from a shadow that Klein is nothing special. At home, Klein can't wait to tell Melissa he got a good-paying job, but upon entering his home, Klein is freaked out to see he is back in the building on Forston Street. Being drawn to a door in particular, Klein heads through the door only to be greeted by a disheveled-looking room with a lone notebook being put on display. Glancing at the notebook, Klein is frightened to see the book declare everyone will perish, only for its pages to suddenly dissolve as Klein is slowly consumed by the Fool card. Waking up from his dream, Klein realizes the house across from the kidnapping place has intel on the lost Antigonus notebook. Moving forward in time, we see Benson heading to visit Klein and Melissa's new home, proud that the three of them will be living in such a lavish home. Sitting down for a homely meal, Melissa can't help but praise Klein's cooking, and with Benson handing Klein a gift to celebrate Klein's new job, Klein tries on the gift only to thank Melissa and Benson for always supporting him. As Benson pats Klein on the head, Klein is reminded of his parents, all three continuing their celebration as it's the start of their new life. In the Blackhorn security campus, we see Dunn and Leonard interrogating a man that was found to have been tailing Klein, and with Dunn's pathway, he is able to see the man exchanging the Antigonus family notebook for some cash. Leonard declares that the secret order is involved somehow, and seeing as they must retrieve the notebook before the secret order does, our duo suddenly hear that Klein has got a lead on the notebook's location. With Klein showing Dunn and Leonard the room in his dreams, Klein is disgusted to see a rotting corpse, and with the son of the deceased man, Ray Bieber, being their best lead, the gang call on Klein to track down Ray. Making use of his cane, Klein attempts to locate his target, but his wand begins to act sporadically, suddenly diving towards Klein himself, forcing Dunn to step in and stop the ritual. Seeing as there is some interference, Dunn says he'll report their findings to the Holy Cathedral, and within a few days Klein is seen waiting outside the Chinese gates. Dunn compliments Klein's dapper outfit, handing him a topaz pendulum that will help with divinations, plus the Holy Cathedral has authorized the use of Grade 2 artifacts to help with locating Ray. Dunn says the Grade 2 items they'll be using are being delivered to them as they speak, powerful items that are sealed behind Chinese gates. And the Grade 2 implies that such an item is very dangerous. Right on cue, three figures are seen meeting up with Dunn, introducing themselves as Ire Harson, a Sequence 7 Nightmare user, and Borja, a Sequence 8 Gravedigger. Finally is Daly, the Sequence 7 Spirit Medium, but the men question if a seer will be safe with them. Dunn sees that the approved artifact is 2-049, all moving into Dunn's office where he fears such a powerful artifact may not be necessary. But Ire says Ray may be a descendant of the Antigonus family, so they'll use everything they can to hunt him down. With Ire reminding everyone to stay alert, Ire along with the others begins to flex and stretch their arms, peer pressuring Klein to join in, but suddenly the artifact box begins to open. Stepping out is a miniature clown doll, but as Klein adores the little creature, its face morphs into a horrifying monster, freezing Klein in place. Unable to move, the doll wraps several strings around Klein's neck ready to take his life, but luckily Leonard severs the strings, surprising everyone as the doll is reacting to the person with the closest connection to the Antigonus notebook. Klein notices his vision slowing down temporarily, only to hear that the doll is capable of entrancing and controlling any one human target at a time. But a strong slap will set the mind-controlled human free, hence why they're performing the strange arm stretch to identify if anyone is under the doll's control. As the doll continues to chase after Klein, Leonard reveals Ray's code, an item that pisses off the clown as it lunges towards the coat, only for Ire to reseal the doll, confirming that Ray is a descendant of the Antigonus family. Heading out, we see our group continue their stretching maneuvers as they head towards their carriages, boarding the carriage as they head towards a certain location. Elsewhere in a factory, we see a disturbing scene where Ray has been placed in the center of a ritual and has been forced to absorb a notebook, taking on a demonic form. In the shadows, a clown-looking man is annoyed he was too late, but upon detecting some carriages approaching, he gets excited, seeing as there may be hope. With Klein and the gang arriving at the factory location, Klein is tasked with using the pendulum to locate Ray, but as soon as Klein starts his ritual, some bloodied mist creeps out from one of the factories, scaring off the gang's horse carriages. As the surrounding landscape begins to vibrate, the gang draw their weapons, all watching as a demonic-looking Ray appears, locking onto the doll artifact. In the blink of an eye, Ray charges towards the doll box, but Dunn and the others get to work, asking that Klein stay back, dragging Ray into their domain. Leonard is seen binding Ray with his vines, only for Daly to begin submerging Ray in her water domain. But strangely, Ray erupts with power, completely shattering the Beyonder's domains as its aura overwrites the environment. Dunn realizes that Ray isn't a Beyonder gone berserk, as he fears they're facing a dead soul, all helplessly watching as Ray continues to barrow towards the doll box. But luckily, Dunn leaps onto him, temporarily putting him to sleep. Daly gets to work locating Ray's weakness, especially since Dunn suspects that Ray is under the notebook's control. But when Ray wakes up, Daly cries that she needs a few seconds to complete her search. Seeing as they'll need to bind Ray down, Dunn begins to chant, all whilst Leonard rushes in close, dancing circles around Ray only to erect a net that binds Ray in place. Before Dunn can finish his chant, Ray's core begins to act strangely, suddenly erupting with power as a bright flash of light distracts Dunn long enough for Ray to skewer Dunn with one of his tentacles, along with blowing Leonard back. Locking back onto the doll box, Ire is forced to hold off Ray's tentacles, but some of the stray tentacles knock the doll box back. As Borja continues to look after the box, Ire ignites his blade only to rush towards Ray's core, but sadly Ire's blade shatters upon impact with Ray's thick exterior. With a terrifying roar, Ire is sent flying as well, forcing Borja to rush to Ire's side. Still conscious, Dunn finishes his enchantment, working in tandem with Klein, who makes use of some night slumber charms to put Ray to sleep, allowing Daly to rush in and attack Ray's weak points. As Daly shreds Ray's body, Ray suddenly implodes, letting out a massive explosion that catches Daly in the impact zone. In the aftermath, Dunn rushes to feed Daly some medicine, but Klein seems strangely drawn to the Antigonus notebook, suddenly reminded of the words Hornicus and Phlegria. At that moment, the clown man from earlier makes his move, rushing towards Klein, but Dunn fires at the clown, realizing it was an illusion. With everyone now on high alert, they surround and protect the notebook, but Klein recognizes the clown to be the same man handing out flyers prior. With every successful shot, the gang end up slaying various illusions, noting how the clown man must be a Beyonder with a sequence of 7 or greater. Ire orders Borja to protect the doll box once more, but as Ire begins dueling the clown with his blade, the clown easily evades each strike. When Leonard joins the battle, the clown easily outclasses Leonard, scaring Leonard away with a well-timed explosion from his face, leaping into the air only to bombard Dunn with bullets of his own. Klein wonders if the clown can see the attacks in advance, testing out his theory as he fires off a stray bullet into the open, only to randomly land a hit on the clown's stomach. Pissed, the clown transfers the bullet wound into his arm, only to unveil a whip that keeps Leonard, Dunn, and Ire busy. Seeing an opening, the clown rushes towards Klein, forcing the men to protect Klein, but realizing they've been tricked, they all turn to see the clown besides the doll box. Pushing aside Borja, the clown lets the doll free, terrifying the boys as they feel a cold sensation run down their spines, all frozen in place as the doll has somehow latched onto all of them. Racking his brain for a solution to break free, Klein suddenly remembers his gray fog, swiftly chanting his luck enhancement ritual, only to successfully enter into his fog-filled domain. Klein wonders if the notebook is enhancing the doll's powers somehow, suddenly coming up with a safety measure to protect himself from the doll's mind control as Klein uses the amulet to perform some divination, returning to the physical world having protected his mind. Out of nowhere, the clown man offers to free Klein's colleagues in exchange for the notebook, and to make the deal more enticing, the clown man utters that he too was a former seer. Klein wonders if this is a trick or not, getting confused when the clown man mistakes Klein to be a sequence 8 seer instead of 9, wondering if his fog is interfering with the clown's judgment. The clown man says the other men are currently asleep, but we notice that Leonard and his shadow are secretly listening in on their conversation. Forcing Klein to make a choice, the clown man tells Klein the corresponding sequence 8 of the seer, something that shocks Klein, but when the clown man erects a skewer to taunt Klein, Klein suddenly grabs a hold of it, pulling the clown man into the puppet's domain. The clown man begins to freeze, seeing as the puppet is beginning to take over his body, demanding to know how Klein is able to move, but sadly Klein puts the clown down with several bullets. Klein sees that the clown belongs to the secret order, turning to help the others, but out of nowhere the clown man springs back to life, crying the word Hornaces only to finally fall over once more. With the doll sealed, we see everyone reflecting after the battle, only for Leonard to utter that he didn't need to save Klein, as he was impressed to see Klein drag the clown man into the doll's domain. Leonard whispers that himself and Klein are special individuals. Cutting back to headquarters, where Dunn submits the notebook to be verified by the Holy Cathedral, apologizing since Klein will have to wait a bit before he can view it. Dunn seems to be coughing quite a lot, praising Klein for a job well done today, but Klein wonders why Ray was in such a rush to absorb the notebook. Dunn says people who seek power don't act rashly, and upon seeing Klein freaked out seeing the clown man's corpse, Dunn says Klein did the right thing and slayed someone to save others. Suddenly remembering something, Klein reveals that the correspondence for a sequence 8 seer is a clown, cutting outside, where Dunn says they'll take care of Daly until she recovers. Before Ayer and Borja leave, they praise Klein for taking down a sequence 7 Beyonder when he was only a sequence 9, something that creates suspicion as Ayer wonders how Klein did it. Leonard helps cover for Klein, suggesting that since Klein was holding the notebook, he was able to negate the doll's mind control and in turn win. As Ayer and Borja depart, Klein suddenly feels his potion digesting, wondering if he can take the clown potion next, plus he still needs to figure out what this Hornaces is. Choosing to visit Koei University, Klein meets up with one of his old professors, Professor Azik, only to ask about his knowledge on the Antigonus notebook along with the nation of the Evernight in the Hornaces mountain range. Azik says his memory is quite foggy, promising to write to Klein if anything comes up, but before Klein leaves, Azik warns Klein to be wary of what he does moving forward. Now, all alone, Azik begins to act strange, suddenly unveiling a skeleton that had been hiding in his shadow. On a cold, rainy night, we see a man writhing in pain, all while speaking to a figure they refer to as the Honorable Oracle. The Oracle accuses the man of betraying the Aurora Order since the man had lost the Antigonus notebook, but the man cries that he didn't intend for Welch and Naya, his sacrificial lambs, to have passed so easily, and to make things worse, Klein is still alive. Before the Oracle can slay the man and force him to devour his own fingers, the Oracle gives the man one last chance to right his wrongs, cutting to the next day, where Klein is seen visiting Old Neil. Old Neil says he'll be teaching Klein some advanced mysticism in the form of ritualistic magic, and most low-sequence rituals require certain items and chants to start the ritual, suddenly asking Klein to watch him closely. Starting off by casting the wall of spirituality, Old Neil says the wall is used to create a closed-off environment that prevents outside interference. Plus, Old Neil reminds Klein to never delve into the unknown, as doing so may risk his life. Klein realizes his luck enhancement ritual may be the unknown Old Neil is referring to, but as Old Neil ignites some candles, he suddenly prays for his 30-pound debt to be erased. As our duo head outside, Old Neil shows off the effect of the ritual by pointing at a lost wallet from a rich person containing money to pay off his debt. Out of nowhere, a wealthy-looking man drives by them only to ask for his wallet back. And seeing as he has no reason to refuse, Old Neil returns the wallet only to receive 30 pounds as payment. Klein is skeptical at the ritual Old Neil just showed him, but Old Neil reminds Klein that he can perform any ritual he wants as long as they cause no harm. The wise words of the Mystery Prayers motto. Klein wonders how such a motto can relate to Rosalie's diary, seeing as Beyonders should focus on digestion and action, and seeing as his potion digested pretty fast, Klein suspects that it is because he's been using his seer abilities often. But out of nowhere, Klein is handed a flyer. Angelica, the Divination Club's receptionist, invites Klein into their store, only for Glassy, the fortune teller, to give Klein a reading, declaring that Klein will return to his world, but it may take a while. Klein reasons that joining the club will improve his seer abilities. And as he pays for his reading, Klein uses his spirit vision to suggest that Glassy see a doctor for his weakened lungs and dark spots between his eyes. Glassy is surprised Klein was able to diagnose him so easily. And when Klein reveals that he is a seer, Klein is welcomed into the Tingen City Divination Club for a £5 fee. As a customer enters the store, Angelica tells Klein Mr. Vincent, their fortune teller teacher, had foresaw that Klein would visit them. Angelica says it's a shame Klein arrived so late since Vincent's class is ending soon. Piquing Klein's interest when he hears the class is on magic mirror divination. Peeping into Hannes Vincent's class, Klein hears that magic mirror divination requires 3 incantations to represent the 7 orthodox gods, making Klein realize that all the people in Vincent's class are worshippers of the Evernight goddess. As Klein checks out everyone's health, he sees Vincent handing a box to one of his students, noting how Vincent is quite healthy overall. With the final student leaving the room, Klein mysteriously senses something ominous from the gift they received, but as he brushes it off, he takes the chance to introduce himself to Vincent. Vincent chooses to give Klein a reading, managing to sniff out most of the troubles Klein has been facing. And as he ends his reading, Vincent utters the words gathering and family may be of use to Klein in the future. Klein wonders if gathering is referring to the gray fog, but nonetheless he thanks Vincent for the reading, still grateful he didn't have to pay for solely for the session. As Klein leaves, we see that Vincent has some fingers missing on one of his hands, cutting to a few days later, where Klein is seen jotting down his duties as a seer. Klein suspects that he needs to further improve his proficiency as a seer along with make use of the gray fog to return home somehow, and this can only be achieved by investigating the potions needed to ascend further along his pathway. Klein fears that such advancements will take too long, wondering if he can modify his luck enhancement ritual to borrow power from his gray fog, but Klein is stuck on where to start. Choosing to refer to himself as the Fool and adding the words ruler above the gray fog and king of yellow and black, Klein suddenly stops and burns his progress, hearing something outside his door. Slowly, Klein approaches his door, but upon opening it, he spots Melissa playing with a wind-up toy. Surprisingly, Melissa had made it herself, pouting as she had meant to create a human doll, not a turtle. And when Klein says he needs to go to work, Melissa cries that she hasn't gotten to spend much time with him. Melissa utters that her friend Selena has invited them to a birthday banquet this Sunday. And seeing as this reminds Klein of the words family gathering Vincent had alluded to, Klein gladly accepts the invitation. Getting back to work, Klein enters into his domain only to await Alger and Audrey's arrival. And upon scanning the pair, Klein is impressed to see Alger has taken on the Sailor pathway and is on Sequence 8 Folk of Rage, whilst Audrey has inherited the Sequence 9 Spectator pathway. Interestingly enough, the fog seems to be enhancing his abilities, and it seems Klein can see the symbols representing each of their pathways, but strangely, they don't seem to be complete. Starting the meeting, Audrey says she has 3 questions, starting off by asking what her role as a spectator is. Alger reveals that Audrey must remain unbiased and observe things from afar, and in turn her pathway will grant her the ability to see other people's true thoughts. Klein adds that Audrey should focus on acting and digesting her potion, something that helps Alger realize something as well. But when Audrey asks if an animal can drink a potion as her second question, The room freezes, all wondering what happened. It's revealed that Audrey's dog had stolen her potion while she wasn't looking, and seeing as it didn't pass away or transform, it's safe to assume the dog has become a Beyonder. Finally, Audrey says that Leon's royalty and nobility have been looking to reform, as Audrey's father is quite incompetent. So Audrey asks where she can find skilled replacements. Klein calmly suggests that Audrey hold an open examination to recruit both nobles and commoners based on their skill, and Audrey should call it the higher exam. Advice Audrey graciously takes to heart. Seeing as Klein needs help as well, he asks that the duo retrieve Emperor Rosalie's diary, a revelation Alger wasn't aware of. Klein also adds that the duo should practice some more ritualistic magic and report to him if they're unable to attend their meetings on Sunday, asking that the duo chant the following: "The fool that doesn't belong to this era, the mysterious ruler above the gray fog, the king of yellow and black who wields good luck." Alger wonders if Klein is on par with the 7 Orthodox gods, but before anything else happens, the trio end their meeting. Back in the real world, Klein says he has freed up some time Sundays, but Klein wonders when he should reveal that he is a seer to his siblings. As some time passes, we see Klein and Benson take Melissa out for some shopping, cutting to July 15th where the trio are dropped off at Selena's house. As Selena would greet the trio, we see Benson greeting Selena's father, all whilst Elizabeth, another one of Selena's friends, greets the siblings. Klein realizes he's met both girls at the divination club prior, but before he can head inside, he detects that Alger is practicing the ritual Klein had asked him to. Inside, we see various people gathered in celebration for Selena's birthday, all toasting to a successful party. When Klein heads over to get some food, he is greeted by Elizabeth, who promises to keep his identity as a seer's secret. And as Elizabeth leaves, Melissa reminds Klein that he can't marry Elizabeth, seeing as she is only 16. As night falls, we see Selena showing off the magic mirror gift Vincent had gifted her. And as Selena recites the ritual she had learnt from Vincent's teachings, Klein suddenly senses something happening upstairs. As strange magic connects Selena's mirror with a different mirror, we see Vincent revealed to belong to the secret's suppliant pathway, creepily crying out for Klein to accept his fate. As Selena asks the mirror when Elizabeth and Melissa will find the man of their dreams, we see Klein hurriedly rushing towards their room, having detected a disturbing aura manifesting. Peeping on the girls' ritual, Klein uses his spirit vision to inspect the room, and upon seeing Selena's magic mirror turn black, Klein is suddenly struck with a horrifying realization. With Selena beginning to act strange, Klein wonders how he can save the girls and notify the captain, suddenly remembering that he can use the ritual old Neil taught him to borrow power from the Evernight goddess. As Klein searches the manor for tools to help with the ritual, we cut back to the girls worried upon seeing Selena unresponsive, and when they check the magic mirror, they're horrified to see a disturbing figure glancing back at them. Suddenly, the girls are blown back by some magic, leading the magic mirror to suddenly infuse and merge with Selena's body, giving rise to the figure hiding within the mirror. Before the creature can attack, Klein appears, casting a slumber spell to bind the creature, only to rush to a nearby table to set up the ritual old Neil had shown him. Klein starts off by chanting the ritual to create the wall of spirituality around their location, something that begins to disturb Vincent's influence with Selena, so Vincent chooses to retaliate by sending some of his blood through his mirror. Before Klein writes down what he wants in his ritual, he notices Selena begins to swell with dark energy, only to let out a howl that fires projectiles at Klein, but luckily his veil halts the attack. Klein tries firing his revolver at the magic mirror infused into Selena's body, but Selena responds by slamming and binding Klein with her hair, only to begin draining him of his spirituality. Selena declares that Klein was meant to be sacrificed just like his friends, and when it's revealed to be Vincent speaking for Selena, Vincent demands to know what Klein figured out when obtaining the Antigonus notebook. With Vincent using Melissa and Elizabeth as hostages, Klein has no choice but to give into his fate, seeing as his body has become too weak to fight back, but out of nowhere Audrey's voice can be heard. As Audrey chants the ritual Klein had instructed her to, Klein is suddenly freed from Selena's grasp as the ritual seems to be dispelling Vincent's hold on Selena's body. But refusing to give in just yet, Vincent offers up his entire arm to retake control of the situation. With Selena reinvigorated with power, she makes her way towards Klein, but Klein has already completed his ritual, having prayed for the evil controlling Selena to be banished. As the ritual takes its effect, we see a mystical snake spirit being dragged from Selena's soul, only for the remaining darkness to be cleansed from Selena shortly after. Seeing as the magic mirror is being expelled from Selena's body, Klein takes the chance to destroy it with a single bullet, officially severing Vincent's hold on the poor girl. Klein rushes to check on Melissa, glad to see she is fine, grateful that Audrey's ritual had saved him in his time of need. Klein fears that his seer role will put his family in further trouble in the future. But as we cut back to Vincent, he is in complete disbelief at his failure. When Vincent tries to flee his room, he is greeted by Aurora Order Oracle 22, a being that snuffs out Vincent due to his failure. In the aftermath, Klein and Dunn visit Vincent only to discover he had been slain, curious as to Vincent's ties to the Antigonus notebook along with who the true creator is. Dunn tries to dig into Vincent's mind a bit, but upon seeing the supposed creator Vincent worships, Dunn becomes speechless before the godly being. In Buckhund, the capital of the Leon Kingdom, we see Audrey fast asleep in her giant estate. As her maids wake her up, Annie the maid tells Audrey she can't wear the same dress twice in a row, even though Guinea had designed it for her. Seeing as she needs to celebrate her 17th birthday properly, Audrey suits up for the momentous occasion, but when she dances with Susie her dog, Audrey is shocked to hear Susie suddenly speak to her. In Zutland Street, we see people attend a performance to recognize the catastrophe of the Alfalfa tragedy, all whilst Klein sneaks into the play late. As the performance reaches its climax, we see the crowd roaring and cheering as the hero of the story makes their entrance. But Klein notices Dunn appear, hearing that Daly has left to help escort the Antigonus notebook to Buckland. Klein is worried seeing as Dunn is still ill, but Dunn is relieved he wasn't infected, reminding Klein that the true creator is an evil being worshipped by secret orders like the Aurora Order. Klein says it's a shame Vincent passed away before Dunn could read more of his memories. Cutting back 1 week, we see Klein hard at work helping a lady look for her lost fiancé aboard the Alfalfa that hasn't returned yet. Given a picture of Joyce Myers, Klein taps into his seer abilities to see Meyer drowning in the middle of the ocean, only to be washed ashore where he sought help. In the present, Dunn and Klein see Mr. Triss, the hero of the Alfalfa tragedy, signing autographs, only to be thanked by Joyce and his wife, as it was Triss that saved him. Before Triss leaves, he glances at Klein, and when Klein greets Joyce, Klein asks if Joyce is having trouble with anything. Entering into a topaz room, Klein hears that Joyce has been having the same nightmare ever since he left the Alfalfa, and as Joyce drifts asleep, Klein is seen delving into Joyce's nightmare. Boarding the Alfalfa, Klein watches as a mutineer tosses a baby offboard, and before the rebel can take his own life, Joyce seems to have rescued them, demanding to know why he betrayed the party. Klein suspects that something is suppressing Joyce from figuring out the true culprit of the Alfalfa tragedy. But before Klein can investigate further, he is transported into a strange misty ruin. Hearing the words Hornacis and Phlegria once more, Klein helplessly watches as strange tentacles attack him, forcing Klein to return to the real world. Klein wonders if the words could link to an evil god or the reason for his transmigration. And as Klein wishes for Professor Azik to write to him soon, Klein chooses to report his findings to Dunn. Klein reveals that the true culprit of the Alfalfa tragedy is the hero Triss himself. But Dunn says they need more evidence to convict Triss, declaring that they'll request help from the mandated Punishers and the Machinery Hive Mind. Cutting over to Triss, we see him embracing the spoils from his title as the hero, only to be awakened by a hooded figure who is visiting him. The hooded figure commends Triss for convincing the men aboard the ship to slay each other, having used his Assassin Pathway Sequence 8 instigator role to help with his schemes. But before Triss can advance further, the hooded figure asks that Triss complete another mission in Tingen. As an early payment, The hooded figure hands Triss the Sequence 7 potion for the assassin pathway, Sequence 7 Wish. Following Klein, he is seen asking Old Neil for help with crafting amulets for his siblings, but is pleasantly surprised when Old Neil guides him to a secret passage within a pub. Boarding an elevator and descending underground, Old Neil shows off the Tianjin Underground Market, a location filled with hundreds of people along with various stores that sell rare items that can help Beyonders. Old Neil says the churches allow the underground market to exist, and the mandated punishers of the Church of Storm especially turn a blind eye to things that happen underground. Out of nowhere, Klein takes note of a strange man with high spiritual affection, and as the man locks onto Klein, the man cries out the word death only to begin rolling on the ground. Old Neil says the man's name is Monster, and that Monster always acts strange. But Klein wonders if Monster could see that his body had perished and had been revived. Heading around the market, Old Neil shows Klein a store selling amulets, but sadly the amulets have no disaster warding effects, seeing as the store clerk isn't a Beyonder. Old Neil suggests that Klein buy a half-finished amulet and enhance it, and upon sifting through the amulets, Klein settles on 2 to buy. In the corner of his eye, Klein spots Triss shopping for some shadow lizards. But before Klein can tail him, he notices a mandated Punisher informant tailing Triss. Immediately, Triss flees the area and causes a stir, pushing people and carts aside only to begin parkouring upwards to escape, but he gets shot having alerted the guards. Having multiple people chasing after him, Triss successfully makes his way back to the surface, and as Klein and Old Neil chase after him, they bump into Dunn, who has discovered 2 men slain by Triss. Continuing after Triss, Klein uses Triss' top hat to track him, all whilst Dunn explains that Triss has been linked to multiple murders in nearby cities. Klein realizes Triss' instigator role was probably the reason why the men aboard the ship became so violent, and Dunn suspects that Demonist sect is involved, a group that worships the primordial Demonists, and all their high-ranking members are women. Having arrived at their destination, Dunn heads inside whilst Klein waits outside, worrying Klein as he hears that the later sequences for the assassin pathway favor female users. As the police storm the building, they choose to evacuate the ladies inside, but a particular lady bumps into Klein, uttering that she doesn't feel good. With Klein confirming that the lady's conditions are normal, we see Dunn uncover that Triss isn't in the building, leading the gang to put up flyers to help with Triss capture. In the coming days, it was reported that Triss was never found and the search was called off, but on the bright side, Klein had been approved as a full-time employee with a new weekly wage of £6. Klein says he spends his time visiting the club a few times a week, and his meeting with Alger and Audrey have slightly changed since Alger acts a little different now. But luckily, Klein had finished crafting the amulets for both Melissa and Benson with the remaining time he had. With time passing, Klein diligently works through his mysticism classes and trains his physical body, cutting to one fateful day where Leonard has come to ask for his help. Leonard explains that the death rate over the past 2 weeks have spiked 5-fold. Most of these cases involve poisoning, self-immolation out of revenge, and self-assassination due to living conditions. Klein is saddened to hear that the workers that passed were all too weak to survive, reminding Klein of his mother, as it was ultimately Benson who had taken up the mantle and saved his family from meeting a similar fate. Getting to work, Klein uses his amulet to live through the workers' lives, only to report that a pale and soft woman touched them all before they each passed. With Har, the squad captain for the Punishers, present with a Sequence 8 sailor pathway, Dunn, Harv, and the other gathered men all suspect that Triss and the Demon Sect are involved somehow. Focusing in on all the cases, Klein suddenly realizes there is a connection, and as Leonard forces Klein to share his theory, Klein says that the people that had passed would have died anyway, so the Demon Sect must have cut their lifespan short with life usurpation. Leonard suspects that the Demon Sect's objective is to summon an evil god or devil, something that would explain why there is suddenly an influx of deaths in Tianjin. And seeing as the gathered men all agree with Leonard and Klein's theory, Leonard boldly points out how genius they are. Klein asks if Leonard has had any strange encounters recently, but Leonard refuses to reveal anything, simply warning Klein they'll remain colleagues as long as Klein is loyal to the Nighthawks. with the gathered men realizing that an altar must be the root of their troubles. Klein is tasked with searching for said altar, and with a rough sketch of the location, the men begin their search through town. Klein reports that there is some interference obstructing his tracking, but the men suspect that the locations with high death counts like the Southern Industrial Area and the Westboro will be their best bet. Within a few moments, Klein and the men lock onto their desired location, and with Dunn pulling the culprit into a dream, Leonard and the others are tasked with infiltration. Following the lady culprit, she is interrupted whilst applying her makeup, swiftly donning her hood only to activate a ritual that enshrouds her body. As Fry enters into the lady's yard, we see several strange figures chasing after him, and as Fry locks onto the figures chasing him, the lady manages to puncture him from behind. Sadly, the lady is completely deceived as Fry's body evaporates, allowing Leonard to make his appearance as he begins knocking the lady around. Before the lady can be consumed by Dunn's nightmare, she slits her own hand to escape the dream. In the real world, the lady leaps to evade Fry's gunfire, and as Dunn rushes in to help with her capture, Klein is left to wonder if the Sequence 8 Leonard and the Sequence 9 Fry will be enough to subdue the Sequence 7 lady. As the lady leaps around her mansion rooftop, Leonard manages to land a direct shot onto the lady, but she unveils a substitution spell that sends shards of glass towards Leonard and Fry. Luckily, Dunn cancels out the spell, but this buys the lady enough time to re-enter into her home, only to head towards an altar in the center of her home. Praying to the shrine, the lady asks to borrow power from the demoness, and within a few seconds, a massive surge of power can be felt from inside the home. Dunn orders Leonard and Fry to circle the house, but as the lady finishes her ritual, strange shadow monsters can be seen spilling out from the house. As the shadows attack Leonard and Fry, we see Fry caught off guard and frozen by the shadows, but luckily his heartbeats ward off the attacking creatures. Dunn is seen entering the house through a window, suddenly attacked and blinded by a curtain, but when Dunn frees himself from his binds, he manages to land a shot on the floating curtains. Strangely, the shot hits something that produces blood, but off in the distance Dunn spots the lady holding the demoness statue. As the demoness statue sends out strands of hairs to consume Dunn, Dunn acts quickly to activate his sleepless skill, blowing away the attacking hair. With Dunn severely weakened, the lady flees the scene only to distract Leonard with some of the attacking hair, successfully puncturing Leonard with a flower bud. When Leonard gives chase to the lady, they both end up meeting near a bridge, only for the lady to unveil her curse as a witch. Leonard begins to panic, seeing as a shadow is acting strange, and upon seeing the flower from earlier had infected him with black magic, Leonard rushes to retrieve one of his fingernails and some hair, dipping the nail in his scar only to toss it aside. As the lady activates her curse, we see Leonard's fingernail suddenly be consumed in dark flames, giving the lady the chance to flee as she leaps off the bridge and disappears into the night. Back at the house, Klein manages to reconstruct the mirror the lady was using, and upon peering into the mirror, Klein realizes the lady is the same girl he bumped into when searching for Triss. Dunn reports that the altar downstairs is what is used to curse the survivors of the Alfalfa, and with all the clues put together, the gang conclude that the lady they just fought was Triss himself. Dunn realizes that Triss had turned himself into a woman, and this would imply that most of the top-ranking Demon Sect members would have originally been men, but converted in order to ascend further down their pathway. Having escaped successfully, Triss is seen boarding a train, all whilst catching the attention of the onlookers, revealed to have castrated himself in order to complete his promotion into a Sequence 7, which with the new name of Trissy. On August 18th, Elizabeth had told Klein about her nightmares ever since returning from Le Monde, and in her dreams was a Wraith Knight and an abandoned castle. Informing Dunn and Fry about such a nightmare, we see the gang head over to Le Monde Castle with the mutated sun's sacred emblem, an item that can disperse wraiths, but it also harms Beyonders if the emblem is active for too long. As our trio head inside the castle with their weapons drawn, we see Klein use his spirit vision to locate a strange apparition appearing from the shadows. prompting Dunn to attempt to disperse the dark cloud attacking them. Spotting a terrifying sword appear from the shadows, our gang leaps to evade the falling blade, and as the blade flies across the room, it returns to the Wraith Knight's side. As the knight rushes our trio, we see Klein make use of 2 Requiem charms to bind the knight in place. But when the knight is struck by 2 explosions, it chooses to disperse its shadow body into hundreds of bugs that swarm the gang. Being overwhelmed, Fire rushes to locate the knight's weakness, all whilst the knight manages to blow Dunn aside with a sneak attack. Spotting the emblem fall from Dunn, the knight chooses to kick it away, only to continue slashing at Dunn. Fire cries that the knight's right hand is its weakness, but when Dunn fires a bullet at the being, it easily slices the projectile before it. When Klein takes the chance to retrieve the emblem, the knight manages to intercept and slam Klein with a powerful elbow, but strangely Klein doesn't feel any pain. Revealed to have been Dunn reveals that he has pulled everyone into his nightmare, and with 1 minute elapsing, Dunn shows off that the emblem never left his possession. In the blink of an eye, a bright light begins to evaporate the Wraith Knight, leaving only a glove left behind. As Dunn and Fire discuss how old the Wraith Knight must have been, we see Klein guided by some specks of light toward some rubble, only to uncover an old, dusty painting. Dunn recognizes the man in the painting to be someone from the 4th epoch, meaning the painting is at least 1,000 years old, and the man seems to be Baronet of Lamud, the first owner of the Lamud Castle, and someone who mysteriously disappeared. Klein is a little freaked out seeing as Lamud somewhat resembles Professor Isaac, and seeing as they'll need to eradicate any remaining wraiths in the castle. The boys agree to stand guard and rotate every 2 hours, with Klein starting the first session. With the other boys heading outside to rest, Klein is given the emblem to keep him safe, wondering how such a sacred emblem was created, especially since it hails from the sun pathway. Wondering if his gray fog can tell him more about the emblem, Klein runs off to perform his luck enhancement ritual, ultimately appearing in his domain with the emblem. When Klein performs another ritual to tap into the sacred emblem, he sees that the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun owns the sun pathway, and it seems a single drop of golden liquid is strong enough to give the emblem its power. Intrigued, Klein tries inspecting the golden liquid himself, but with a single touch the sheer power from the droplet sends him into a frenzy as the hot, blistering sun begins to consume his domain and burn him alive. Crying out in pain, Klein is luckily rescued by his gray fog as it manages to quench the flames, searing hunger, making Klein wonder if he had accidentally glanced at a deity. Out of nowhere, Klein's burn marks begin to heal, and even more strangely, Klein's brain is suddenly overloaded with information regarding how to create the sun charm. Klein sees that he must never gaze at gods, only to learn that the sequence 4 for the sun pathway is unshadowed, confirming to Klein that the golden liquid must have been the blood of a god. Klein wonders how he can use such information to his advantage, a little annoyed that his domain has been destroyed due to his recklessness, but nonetheless he chooses to return to the real world for now. Klein is relieved nothing happened whilst he was gone, wondering what the Angel of Pure White was referencing during his ritual, but regardless he successfully wraps things up at the castle. As Klein is dropped off, Dunn and Fire head to return the emblem, but Klein notices that a letter has appeared in their mailbox. Heading to Koei University, Klein is excited as Isaac has finally written back to him about his findings into Hornaces, but Klein begins to get suspicious if Isaac is someone he can trust. With the skies getting cloudy, Klein heads into Isaac's office, only to see that it is empty. In the corner of his eyes, Klein spots some blood hidden behind a piece of cloth, and upon further inspection Klein is speechless to see a painting of Lamund Castle made out of blood. Out of nowhere, Isaac appears to greet Klein, taking note of Klein's frightened expression only to reveal that he has been receiving weird dreams lately, and recently Isaac has been painting to make sense of his dreams. Isaac changes topics and hands Klein a book regarding the Hornaces main peak ruins, only to order Klein to sit down and read it, something that makes Klein stiffen up. When Klein flicks through the book, he recognizes the ruins he visited whilst performing one of his rituals, wondering why the image doesn't have the throne he saw in his vision. Apparently, the Hornacis mountain ranges span Lone and Intis, and shows that an ancient civilization existed long ago, reminding Klein that the Evernight nation was mentioned in the Antigonus notebook. The book says that the beings in the past were humans that didn't believe in death and would pray to the Evernight, only to keep their deceased ones' bodies with them for 3 days, weirding Klein out as the book doesn't explain how the corpses were buried. Azik lightens the mood by serving some beverages, only to agree with Klein, as it seems the corpses from the ancient civilization seem to vanish, all thanks to the ruler of the Evernight, the mother of the sky. Klein wonders how these beings relate to the Evernight goddess, swiftly taking a sip of the coffee Azik had served him, only to dump in loads of sugar to sweeten the drink. Azik points out how Klein normally likes his coffee bitter, uttering that he had used mysticism to peer into Klein's fate, but sadly, he wasn't able to see much. Azik sternly asks if Klein has seen the Lamund castle before, freaking Klein out as Azik suddenly appears before him, only for silence to fill the room. Luckily, Azik doesn't seem to be hostile, as he says he wants to find out more about his past, cutting to a few moments later where Azik and Klein are heading back to Lamund Castle. Klein says he was able to sneak away and perform a divination in his domain before coming to the castle, having full faith that Azik is a good man, especially since he foresaw Azik saving him in the future. Azik still remembers the scenery around the abandoned castle, easily able to point out where the stables were, and upon walking up to a pillar, Azik says his son used to carry around a heavy sword. Klein begins to put the pieces together, as it seems the Wraith Knight was actually Azik's fallen son, and as Azik ascends the stairs before them, he magically draws the blade left behind by his son. With a single swing, the surrounding scenery begins to piece itself back together, only for our duo to be sent back in time, allowing Klein to catch a glimpse of Azik's son playing with his longsword. Sadly, Azik's dream crumbles before them, prompting Klein to ask if Azik is okay. When a strange odor can be smelt, Klein deduces that an evil spirit is being suppressed somewhere, suddenly led underground by Azik. With his spirit vision, Klein scans the area only to stumble onto a ritual that is used to seal wraiths. And as Azik leans over the ritual site, he pushes away the lid only to reveal the corpse of a fallen knight. Before Klein can say anything, Azik begins to break down, suddenly swelling with power as a powerful gust of wind blows Klein into a wall. Instantly, hundreds of spirits begin to flock to their area, all whizzing past Klein and towards Azik, only to project what remains of them before Klein. Flung into the past, Klein is placed into the aftermath of a war-torn time, and with some men burning the bodies of the deceased, they're frightened away to see Azik himself rise up from the body of corpses. A strange older lady cries out that a curse is keeping Azik alive, and seeing as he has been given a second chance, Azik rushes to slay the men before him. When Azik is cornered and overpowered, a strange being stands up for him, revealed to be a massive skeleton that towers over his foes. With his new powers, Azik was able to slay all of those who stood before him, ultimately donning a new identity as he rose up the rankings and amassed an army that fought by his side, and with multiple years passing, Azik was ultimately granted the title of Grand Baron Lamud. Azik was on top of the world as he had lived for his wife and child, and although Azik treasured the times he would have with his family, things began to change as time went by. One day, whilst his wife was sick, Azik had unknowingly called for his army of spirits to show themselves, something that ultimately frightened his child. Unable to control his powers, Azik accidentally harmed his child, something he felt guilty for doing, so he chose to leave his family along with his legacy behind. Although his son tried to look for Azik, Azik left without a trace, completely vanishing. In the present, Azik is revealed to be a Beyonder using the corpse collector pathway, and luckily Klein is able to snap Azik from his fit of rage. Azik shows Klein that his son's corpse was damaged, as it seems his head was stolen, explaining why the Wraith Knight appeared out of nowhere, something Azik suspects was done a few months ago. Pissed, Azik draws his own blood using his longsword, only to strangely strike Klein with his blood, magically dragging Klein into a strange realm. Seeing Azek standing before a door, Klein watches as hundreds of skulls collapse before Azek, only for Azek to point out a skull in particular, annoyed that he is unable to locate the whereabouts of his son's head. With a strange feather entering the room, Klein is amazed at Azek's powers, leading Azek to promise to get revenge for his son as he officially buries Tenno Egger's body, putting him to rest. Klein asks if Azek has remembered who he is, but Azek admits that his memories are fragmented, especially since he falls asleep every few decades, and it seems his memories get wiped every time. Azek says he is able to piece together his past lives with different families, and although he had treasured them, Azek had ended up leaving them all. Klein feels sympathy to Azek as he has lived many lives, but can't remember anything about them. And as our duo part ways, Klein says he too feels like a lone ship sailing the seas with no idea of what his future holds. Klein is grateful to have Melissa and Benson as his family in this world, agreeing to spend as much time with his current family, since he plans on leaving and returning home someday. Before Klein left, Azek had told Klein that the Antigonus notebook may have clues to what he is looking for, but as we flash forward a few days, we see Klein and old Neil visiting headquarters. Instantly, our duo are greeted by Kenley White, who seems to be celebrating his recent engagement. But Sikatron, a Sequence 8 midnight poet of the Sleepless Pathway, suddenly takes inspiration from the party. Sika says she is writing a tragic romance novel, something that excites the crowd, as Leonard himself tries reciting some poems he came up with. But Roseanne wonders why they still have to come into work since they're celebrating Kenley's engagement. Suddenly appearing, Dunn assigns Kenley and Sika to the Westboro and Gold Indus areas. Leonard and Royale will stay at Blackthorn, whilst Dunn and Fire patrol the Westboro and Raphael Cemetery. Klein says he hasn't been assigned a role, something Leonard says is normal as Dunn often forgets things, but Dunn says Klein should watch over the Cheney's gates, ordering him to never open it no matter what. Dunn also reminds Klein to submit a 10,000-word performance review to the Holy Cathedral since it's been 2 months since Klein joined the Nighthawks. Getting to work, Klein retrieves all the cases he was a part of, but out of nowhere Klein hears some noise from the Cheney's gates, suddenly drawing his revolver as the gates begin to open. As a being barges the gate open, Klein prepares to fire only to scream, drawing the attention of Leonard and Royale who are on patrol. When the duo arrive, Klein reports that a strange doll had appeared and gave something to him, but Royale recognizes the doll to have been the Misfortune Cloth puppet. As our duo leap away from Klein, they reveal that in the past people have gone missing due to strange incidents with the Cheney's gates. And with another being appearing before everyone, Leonard and Royale quickly draw their revolvers. Luckily, it is just old Neil checking on Klein, uttering that he has stomach issues only to rush off to the bathroom, but Leonard reassures Klein that he is fine. Leonard mentions how strange it is for the doll to take interest in Klein, who is watching over the gate, deducing that the Antigonus notebook that has been sealed behind the gates is causing the doll to act up. At home, we see Klein attend his meeting with Audrey and Alger, only to peep in on some of the papers Audrey and Alger had collected from Roselle's diary. Klein learns that Mr. Zeradol is a descendant of the Zeradol family in the 4th epoch, and was also the leader of the Secret Order, and it seemed the Order members were fixated on stealing relics from the Antigonus family and had access to the Seer Pathway. Klein is grateful the pair was able to give him information on the Emperor's diary, offering to answer any concerns they have, only for Audrey to ask when her potion will fully digest. Having just read the information from the diary, Klein says it normally takes 1 to 6 months depending on the person, intriguing Alger as he reveals that a Sequence 8 listener from the Aurora Order is seeking the holy residence of the true creator. Alger adds that many believe that the true creator never died and had left behind its core, and it seems the Hangman card was modeled after the true creator when Emperor Roselle created the card. Klein utters that the true creator feels like a fallen creator, something that prompts Alger to ask if Klein would like anything else as payment, leading Klein to ask for more pieces of the Emperor's diary or anything on the Antigonus family. Alger says he heard the Antigonus family possess a terrifying pathway, something that can be traced back to the 3rd epoch known as the Cataclysm epoch. Apparently during the 4th epoch of the gods, the Antigonus, the Amon, and the Abraham families all supported the Blood Emperor in creating the Tudor Empire, but strangely the Evernight goddess eradicated the families and gave way to a new epic. With Klein ending the meeting, he wonders what pathway and relics the Antigonus family is hiding, plus it seems the Secret Order may have more information on the Seer pathway. Sorting out his thoughts, Klein revisits the first case where Bieber absorbed the notebook and the doll tracked him. Next was Vincent forcing Selena to perform dark divination through a mirror, but even still Klein can't find any clues linking them. Klein wonders if there was any interference during such cases, using his gray fog to peep into Elliot's kidnapping, only to realize that he had missed a clue regarding the notebook. Seeing as his mind is still foggy, Klein tries recounting the locations of his previous cases, cursing at his weak spirituality as it seems his potion digestion has stalled lately. Focusing in on his clues for the clown potion, Klein stumbles onto the glowing brain of Bieber's remains along with a bloody orb appearing from the corpse of the clown they slayed, only to suddenly see an image of Welch and Vincent interacting with the Antigonus notebook. Klein wonders if he should use the notebook to lure out the Secret Order in order to get the recipe to the clown potion, but Klein takes note of the glowing brain and bloody orb along with the strange older man who has appeared before him. The next day, we see Christina hounding Angelica for where Klein is, only for Klein to coincidentally arrive. Klein sees Christina holding a paper talking about Lenevis, a man suspected in the Iron Core investment case in the Hornacis Mountain. Words that catch Klein's attention. Klein says he'll need items that belong to Lenevis if they want to track him down, and luckily Christina has brought Megos, Lenevis' pregnant fiancée. Klein is disappointed to learn that Lenevis got Megos pregnant and disappeared with all of the family's funds. And to make things worse, Klein can't use his seer abilities unless Megos gives birth to Lenevis' child. Annoyed, Megos storms off with Christina running off with her, giving Klein a chance to ask if Angelica recognizes the man in his dreams. Someone Angelica says she saw speaking with Vincent once. Angelica asks if Klein has any leads on how Vincent passed away, crying out that the mystery is like one of Madame Furz's detective stories where the culprit is often hidden in plain sight. Angelica also mentions how Vincent and the man were chatting about some sort of ruin, reminding Klein of Deweyville library records he saw earlier. Heading straight to the library, we see Klein ask for the borrowing record of the Hornacis Archaeology Journal, swiftly flicking through the records only to see that Lavinus had checked out the book. Strangely, Sirius Arapes is a name that appears quite often, and when Klein heads over to check out the book, he coincidentally stumbles on his Sirius himself. Before Klein can play it cool, Sirius bolts from their location, completely barging through a window to escape, prompting Klein to give chase. Using bloodstains to track down Sirius, Klein is caught off guard when a transformed Sirius is seen rushing towards him. But luckily Sirius falls short when leaping towards Klein. Klein chooses to put Sirius down with a bullet to the head, only to see that Sirius is a Sequence 9 secret supplement pathway user. With Sirius quickly losing spiritual energy, Klein enters Sirius's mind and quickly asks Sirius to disclose the recipe for Clown Potion, only to notice a pendant on Sirius's arm that reminds Klein of the Hang Giant, a revelation that brings Klein before the true creator. Luckily, Dunn knocks Klein back to his senses, reminding Klein to never communicate with the spirit body of a Beyonder gone berserk. When Leonard appears, he points out how odd it is for Klein to be involved in so many Beyonder incidents. And with Sirius officially passing away, the gang stumble onto a letter addressed to Mr. Z from the Aurora Order. Klein hears that all 22 Aurora Order members are represented by letters, and as Leonard reads the letters, Sirius says he knows the recipes for the Seer, Apprentice, and Clown Potion. Klein says he was only able to extract the Clown recipe, something that will need to be appraised by the Holy Cathedral. Plus, it seems like the Antigonus family has left behind some secret treasure on the main peak of the Hornacis mountain range, within the nation of the Evernight ruins. To end the letter, Sirius mentions preparations about Doomsday, as he had planned to sacrifice everyone in Tingen to their master. Heading back in his realm, Klein says the horrific pathway the Antigonus family was hiding must be the Seer pathway, and this would explain why Hornaces keeps appearing, but Klein wonders what Phlegria is referring to. Closing his eyes, Klein recounts all the information he has, only to think about if the seer pathway has any clues for him. Just then, Klein asks what the real reason for the previous Klein shooting himself was, choosing to investigate further with his mist, but it seems his spirituality is still too weak. Suddenly, Klein feels his potion digesting, a phenomenon that allows Klein to break free from his limits. Trying out his powers, Klein endlessly zips around Tingen City and immerses himself in the scenery without being detected. And when Klein stops before a massive building, strange pulses send him back into his domain, noting the red smokestacks to be where his next big clue is. Flashing back 1 month, we follow Lavinus, the Sequence 8 swindler for the Marauder pathway, placing Tenno's skull beside a lady with a familiar-looking pendant, only to leave the scene. With Hood Eugen, a Sequence 7 psychiatrist with the Spectator pathway along with 3 other devout followers, all giving up their lives, they successfully awaken a being using the lady's body. At night, Klein receives a nightmare of the note the doll had given him, quickly waking up as he wonders what the symbol he was shown could mean. Nearby Koei University, we see Klein fishing under a bridge, upset that he hasn't found any leads on the red smoke stacks, even with his divination and gray fog. Klein wonders who could be interfering with his snooping, wondering what else he can do to grow stronger apart from ascending with the clown potion. But suddenly Klein remembers the flaring sun charm. Before Klein can think of a way to use the blood from the eternal sun, Isaac appears asking what's on Klein's mind. Klein reveals that he has been trying to track down the people behind everything that has been going on, but Isaac advises Klein to ease off every so often, finally giving Klein the courage to request something from Isaac. Back in his domain, we see Klein receive another piece of Roselle's diary regarding a mysterious island, only for Audrey to report that she has been in contact with several secret Beyonders in hopes of gathering more diary pages for Klein. Alger offers to help Audrey find any information regarding the secret organization she may be after, but Alger says he'll need to be paid, demanding Audrey fork over £1,000 in non-consecutive old bank notes. Klein is surprised seeing as £1,000 can be used to buy a mansion, but without hesitating, Audrey agrees to pay up as she'll send over the money to Alger's desired address. Getting started, Alger reveals that over 100 secret organizations exist, with the notable ancient ones from the 4th epoch being the Secret Order, the Demonist Sect, and the Moses Ascetic Order. Interestingly, Moses Ascetic is the oldest of the order with a Sequence 9 pathway of Mystery Prior, a pathway Klein recognizes old Neil to have, and they worship the hidden sage god. In the present day, the Moses Prior is considered an evil organization, and this is all due to the hidden sage god personifying itself to be an evil god. As for orders created early in their epoch, the Rose School of Thought and the Numinous Episcopate that worship death are orders that reside in the southern continent. Finally, the Aurora Order, Element Dawn, the Psychology Alchemist, and others all came to fruition in the past 2 to 3 decades. And with that information, Klein ends their meeting. The next day, we see Klein brushing his teeth, all whilst wondering if the Numinous Episcopate could be linked to Isaac, plus Isaac still needs to help Klein with the thing he asked of him. Outside, Klein hears a paper boy selling newspapers regarding the Evernight Goddess, and as Klein rushes to purchase a paper, he accidentally bumps into Benson and Melissa, who has just returned from their morning shopping. Melissa is surprised to see Klein has a revolver on him, but Klein utters that he is working as a consultant, so such a weapon is necessary, cutting to a few minutes later where Klein is seen skimming the newspaper he bought. Klein sees that there have been no casualties lately, and only worshippers of the Evernight Goddess have been targeted, something Klein believes to be Isaac's doing. Arriving at the bar below their headquarters, Klein notices Neil stopping Harv from leaving him, and upon seeing Klein appear, Neil asks right the bartender for 3 beers. With Harv forced to pick up the tab, we see the boys toasting and chugging down the beverage, only for Harv to begin complaining about the hauntings that have been targeting the Evernight worshippers, a serious issue for Harv and his mandated punishers, seeing as the docks are his territory. Harv wonders if he should get done to help deal with the issue, pointing out how the spirit bodies haunting people appeared to be ancient beings from the 4th epoch, a phenomenon that confirms to Klein that it is Isaac's doing. Quickly changing the topic, Klein forces them in to cheer as they drink a little longer. And with Neil tossing Harv's flask refilled with some booze, the boys watch as Harv departs. Right on cue, Leonard appears, asking for Neil to report to Dunn. Dunn admits that the hauntings at the dock is quite suspicious, and seeing as Leonard and Kinley are familiar with the docks, Dunn asks for Neil to accompany them and figure out the matter. Klein interjects, volunteering himself to deal with the matter, and with Neil promised a bonus when he completes the mission, Dunn reveals that they can't bring the sun emblem since the area may be too crowded and the emblem may harm them indirectly. Luckily, Klein says it's better to be safe in case any wraiths appear, something that sways Dunn. With Leonard in charge of the sun emblem, we see the gang arrive at the dock, but Leonard accuses Klein of tagging along in order to find out more about Leonard's past. Sadly, Klein could care less as the gang greet Gate, the sergeant overseeing the docks. Gate reports that strange things have been happening recently, escorting the gang towards a building in particular, but our four-man team is ridiculed by a crowd that has formed. Taking charge, Leonard announces that they'll be exorcising the location, choosing to show off some gimmicks to help win over the crowd. Entering into the run-down-looking building, the gang instantly detect beings crawling all over the place, and as several spirits rush towards the group, we see it pass through Kinley without issue. Strangely, before Neil can order for reinforcements, he sees Gate has become a mindless fool, and with several other people behaving moronically, we cut to Klein interacting with one of the spirits. Klein sees that the sun emblem is about to activate, signaling to the spirits to disperse as they swiftly exit the bodies of the possessed, successfully clearing the scene without casualties. Up next, Leonard assigns Klein the role of putting on a show to convince the crowd of their successful exorcism, choosing to work alongside Neil as they both begin chanting a random spell. With a dramatic finish, the gang leave the scene, but outside, we notice a rogue carriage running over a familiar-looking lady. Luckily, Harv appears just in time to protect Megos from being harmed, and strangely, she seems to be excited about giving birth to her child. Neil asks why a busy man like Harv is here, but Harv says he's been assigned to follow Megos around in hopes of finding more intel on Lenivis, her missing fiancé, and sadly, there doesn't seem to be Beyonders involved in Lenivis' disappearance. Seeing Harv so close with Neil, Klein learns that Harv and Neil used to drink together, and sadly Neil's wife, Celeste, used to play piano for them. Neil utters that Celeste passed many years back, and only Neil and Harv are what remains of their group of friends, something Klein feels sorry for. But Neil reassures Klein that death is a natural thing. As the sun begins to set, we see the gang wrapping up their exorcisms across the port, all whilst Harv continues to tail Megos. Leonard does wonder why the hauntings haven't led to any people being harmed, instructing Klein to do some digging with his divination, but sadly Klein is thrown into a foggy domain. Klein says since Isaac is far more powerful than him, he won't be able to peer into Isaac's antics. But luckily, he is able to make out an inverted pyramid that can be found in the southern continent in Balam or the Highland Kingdom, a mausoleum built by the descendants of Death. Kinley wonders how Death, the creator of the Pale Disaster and primordial demons, can be involved. But Klein is more curious if Isaac was revived on the battlefield of the Pale Disaster. Klein says Isaac being a descendant of Death could be dangerous, seeing as the person who stole the skull of Isaac's son is leveraging such power, and seeing as they've hit a wall. Leonard says they'll take turns watching over the docks with the emblem every hour. Luckily, Klein is given the emblem first, quickly setting up a ritual. Setting 2 golden charms alongside the sun emblem, Klein gets to work drawing out the power of the sun emblem, only to beg for the sun charm to transfer him some of its power. With powerful gusts of wind blowing across the room, we see Klein's 2 replica charms resonating with the sun emblem, but outside we see Kinley and Leonard take note of the sudden change of weather. Leonard is immediately skeptical of what Klein may be doing, but out of nowhere a small boat is seen torpedoing over the sea only to suddenly explode as a strange creature is seen swimming below them. In mere moments, the man aboard the boat is devoured, and the creature is seen darting towards Klein's location. Not before long, Klein's ritual is interrupted as the creature appears before him, having smashed a hole in the boat to reach Klein. Klein's revolver shots are strangely useless against the being, and with a horrifying roar, Klein sees that the creature before him is a Beyonder lost control. With the creature locking onto Klein, Klein has no choice but to dart around the room to escape, but suddenly Leonard appears, knocking the creature back. Leonard recognizes the creature to be at least a Beyonder of level 8 before losing control, and seeing as they have to slay the creature before it escapes back into the Tussock River, Klein rushes to pass off the emblem to Kinley all whilst Neil and the guards help evacuate everyone. Neil does ask for the guards to look for Harv to help assist them, but out of nowhere, a massive explosion rings out from the boat, only for several pieces of debris to fall onto a civilian. Neil is seen rushing in front of the debris to protect the civilian, all whilst Leonard is forced back by the sheer strength of the monster, choosing to stay on the defensive until he comes up with a plan. When the creature leaps into the air, it slams into the boat to intimidate Leonard, but Leonard finds an opening to retrieve his staff and whack the creature. Pissed, the monster blows Leonard back, forcing Leonard to retaliate with attacks of his own, buying enough time for Klein to bind the monster with the chain dispenser he found on board. Before Leonard can finish off the creature, it suddenly breaks free from its binds, causing the boat to shake further with power exuding from the creature. Having unknowingly been caught in some loose rope, Klein is suddenly ensnared and strung up into the air by random rope lying around, and strangely the creature seems to lock on Neil temporarily, only to continue pursuing Leonard. Trying to draw out the fight, Leonard begins to ascend the boat, but the monster simply continues after him, even enhancing its muscle to dart after Leonard. With Leonard caught in a sticky situation, he helplessly watches as the creature rushes towards him. But funnily enough, Klein swings around and intercepts the creature with a kick. Following up, Neil manages to cast some slumber charms to weaken and restrain the creature, and from the body of the monster, Neil sees a familiar-looking flask. With no time to spare, Leonard gets to work dragging the creature into his domain only to officially paralyze and put it to sleep, and with Neil crying out that the monster is Harv, Klein sadly declares that Harv is too long gone. When Leonard offers to put down Harv, Neil says he'll do it himself, solemnly retrieving Leonard's revolver only to place his old friend down. Completely defeated and lifeless, we see Neil return home later that day only to wash away his sorrows with some piano playing, completely entranced by the depressing life he has lived. Klein tries lighting a candle to brighten the dark room, feeling sorrow for the old man, as his home life is a complete contrast to his bright personality at work. Klein notices a picture frame of Neil and his friends, wondering why Harv suddenly lost control only to be strangely drawn to a bracelet on one of the ladies in the picture. Suddenly, old Neil begins playing the piano more sporadically, triggering a realization in Klein as he sees everyone in the picture is also wielding a strange-looking item. With Neil wrapping up his performance, Klein returns home only to announce that he had completed creating 2 flaring sun charms. But Klein fears that such charms won't stop him from losing control, beginning to freak out seeing as most Nighthawks pass from losing control. Stealing his resolve, Klein declares he must become more powerful to prevent himself from losing control, and seeing as it is important for Dunn and the Nighthawks to learn about the importance of taking action and the digestion of potions, Klein declares he'll tell the others about what he learned, plus he'll advance to the clown stage immediately.